Welcome to the AZ Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Hamid. Let's go. Woo! I think we're live, right? All right.
We are live.
With Brad Thomas, co-founder of Evercast. Hey, Brad, how are you?
Thank you for the invite, and it's so great to actually be in person.
Yes, it's one of those things where we needed to get past this COVID and put it behind us.
Yep, and hopefully we learned a little bit from it, and we're going to move on to bigger and better things.
Speaking of COVID, your business, Evercast, was doing $1 million in ARR last year about this time.
Yeah, I think it was maybe even a little bit less than that.
Less than $1 million.
I think it was under $1 million, yeah.
And fast forward a year, right now you guys just broke 10 million ARR.
Oh, yeah.
That is absolutely phenomenal growth. 1,000%, 10-time increase in revenues.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So the catalyst for that was COVID.
Yep.
So I want to go through all of that. So first, put us just to build up the story. I want to know, what was Evercast like pre-COVID?
Yeah.
Where you were struggling, you barely hit $1 million in ARR. Talk about those struggles, and then put us through the sort of like past year.
Sure.
And that roller coaster ride.
Well, so when you start a company, and you know this very well, that you're always starting a company based off a set of assumptions, right? Like, okay, I think someone will pay me for this idea. And so in 2016, when I set off to build this with two of my other co-founders, we knew that there was a need for a platform that would enable remote collaboration between like video content creators and musicians and all that type of stuff.
Okay.
And so
actually, maybe that's a good place to just actually, what is Evercast?
Because
I just realized, not everyone's going to know that.
No, totally. That's a good question. So, we always like to consider ourselves, we'll call us the Zoom for creatives, right?
Okay.
So what does that mean? So that basically means that there's a bunch of different ways that you can stream through our platform. So you can share your screen, you can stream external devices, but the bottom line is that what you get out of it is a director can work remotely with their editor or their visual effects team in real time. It's kind of like, how when you share your screen on any Zoom or Skype or anything like that, just imagine sharing your screen, but it being 60 frames per second, 1080. We're working on 2K and 4K options and that type of stuff, but just a super crisp, super clear screen share, basically.
Right.
And that allows
with the audio of the movie or whatever you're playing going through as well.
Totally. So we started off with just stereo, but now we have 5.1. We're going into 7.1. We're actually even working with a company called Mach 1 that allows you to do spatial audio. So as you move your head left and right, you can simulate up to Atmos surround sound without actually having a full surround sound setup. So we like calling ourselves the Zoom for creatives, because ultimately that's what we're trying to become, is the go-to remote collaboration platform for creatives, right?
Gotcha.
And so we knew that there was a need for it, and we knew that because in a previous company that I was a part of, we were doing a lot of marketing videos, and it was always such a pain, especially if your team was remote, and just so happens that our team was remote, to have to. Of course, I was the editor, right? So I was not only one of the founders, but I ended up being the editor for a lot of this marketing content. And it was always such a pain to, we would work on a piece of content. I would render the content out. I would send it to the team. I would wait for their feedback. Usually it wouldn't come until the evening. And I'd get the feedback back, and I didn't understand half the stuff that was written in the notes. And then it was just it just felt like it made it feel really detached.
Right.
And so me and one of the other founders, we started looking at other options. Skype, I think Zoom was around, so we looked at Zoom, Skype, and nothing could just create the quality that we were looking for, especially
to
collaborate on that type of work, right? Especially when it came down to the final 10%. It's one thing to use any platform and just kind of get you up to like the 80%, 90% mark, but it's the devil's in the details when you start getting to finalizing a piece of content like that, right?
Yeah.
So especially for the finalizing part of making content, that back and forth with a remote production team, absolute pain in the butt.
Yeah. I can imagine.
So when the previous company unfortunately didn't work out, it was like, okay, do I pack up and go get a job? Or, I've been doing this for 20 years and,
Doing this being an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I always...
Once an entrepreneur, always.
You
can't pull that out of the person, right?
It's the creative part of being an entrepreneur is what it's really all about for me, right? It's the fact that you take something that was once in your head, like just an idea,
Right.
and all of a sudden, down the road, you build something, and now that thing that came from your head, which didn't even exist before, is now interacting with people, which is just,
Yeah.
it's like having a kid, and that kid grows up to be something amazing, and then has a positive impact on other people. So I've always been addicted to that. Like it's an
the
addiction.
feel that you get when other people use your product
Yes.
and they're like, man, I find this useful. I can't live without it anymore. And
is.
it's like that feeling for entrepreneurs, I think, is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and that's why we're insane and we keep going back to it, right? Because and we'll talk about the struggle in a little while, but yeah, it is very difficult, and that's only one piece of the equation, right? So, but yeah, so we started building the technology, and sometimes you don't realize why things don't fully exist until you get into them, and you're like, oh.
Yeah,
okay,
it's way harder.
There's a lot of things to this. It's not just producing a nice quality screen share. No. There's a lot more to it, because once you actually are able to get this low latency stream, then it's like, how do you build out your Amazon servers so you can scale? And there's just so many things that come into play. So it took about 3 years, and I think at the time we raised maybe $3 million or something like that.
Okay.
And I still.
What year did Evercast start?
So we founded it in 2015, I think, but we didn't really start like really going until the end. Maybe like early 2016 was when we really started diving into it.
So let's just say 2016, sometime you start. So for almost 4 years, you're struggling to build it. With $3 million in funding, you struggled to build it to a $1 million revenue company.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was like 3 or 4 million, but yeah, it was under 5 for sure.
Okay. 4 or 5 million that you raised. Or 3 or 4 million that you raised.
Yeah, it was under 5 to get us. It was like 3 or 4 to get us to the 1 million, or close to the 1 million AR.
Okay, perfect. And then was it a smooth ride? Like, was it well? I know it's never a smooth ride. So let me retract my question and instead ask: were there times where you were like, okay, we're probably going to be shutting down, and how late were some of those shutdown moments hitting you guys?
Just the thought of what we've had to go through makes me start to sweat a little bit, because it's like there were so many times where there's no way I thought we were going to be able to overcome a certain hurdle, right? And it's also amazing too how there's times when things happen and you're like, oh my gosh, this happened. This is amazing. This is the thing that's gonna be the thing that sets us up for everything else. And it's amazing how sometimes the things that you think are gonna be the things that help you take off never end up being anything, right? So yeah. So
what were some of those things?
Just like getting a certain director. Like especially
to use your product.
To use the product, right?
You're like, who can you name some of them, or because you're working with Hollywood people?
Oh,
right?
every major studio. I mean, every major director. I mean, pretty much everyone.
So who was one of the first famous people that you guys were like, okay, we got this person, and therefore we're probably over the hurdle. This is probably going to be the catalyst.
This is something I actually can talk about. So our first so there's two. So the first thing was getting my now co-founder and buddy and best friend, Roger Barton.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know who he is, turns out that film editing is one of the most important things outside of actually directing the movie or a TV show, right?
Right.
The film editor is what basically takes all the footage and then tells the story through cuts.
Okay.
So Roger is one of the bigger, probably the biggest, one of the biggest film editors in the industry, and he's done all the Transformer movies and Pirates of the Caribbean, World War Z, just a ton of movies, right?
Okay, wow.
And so he was supposed to go to Atlanta to start the new Godzilla one, the one that recently came out like 6 or 7 months ago, right? So he was going to be editing that movie, and he was supposed to go to Atlanta for 5 months. And he didn't want to go because he was actually going through a divorce because of the strain that being a film editor in Hollywood put on his family life between his son and his now ex-wife. And so he was starting to look for, how can I convince the studio to allow me to do what I'm good at, but do it at home,
right,
and not have to go to Atlanta for 5 months and be away from what he really cared about, which was his son.
Right.
So just a fortuitous moment where my original business partner, Alex, he's a successful entrepreneur. He started a company called OmniMount many years ago. And I think it was his first investor. His first investor's son was just so happened to be living in the house that Roger rented
wow.
the next door to this kid. So one day, Roger was, I think, out in the driveway, and this guy just walked over to Roger and was like, "Hey, my dad's buddy is working on this remote software." And Roger's like, "No way." Like, no way. So 3 days later, we had a demo, and he was blown away. And by the way, too, I mean, maybe 2 weeks prior to that demo, that was the first time we got a solid stream. Like a stream where I'm like, okay, that looks good. That looks really good.
What year is this?
So that would be
timeline
so that was 2000 in like late 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, almost 2018.
Okay. So you're getting your first big break with a major film editor.
Yep.
And he's like, this is it.
This is what not only what I've been hoping for, but also my peers, right?
Okay.
So thinking in the back of his head, he's like, man, if this actually works out, this is something I want to really dive into. And so I think it was a Warner Brothers and Legendary picture. And so he contacted them, and they said, listen, we kind of checked it out. It's, it reaches a baseline level of security. Tell you what, do it with the director. If the director likes it, you can use it.
Yeah.
So on a Sunday afternoon, and we waited like 2 months, by the way, for the director to finally find a moment to use it with Roger. And Roger was supposed to go to Atlanta in like 10 days.
Yeah.
So he calls us up and he's like, guys, this is it. This is the moment. I'm hopping in with him in 30 minutes, right? And this is one of those.
They're like cranking up the servers.
Oh, man. Just like, I mean, there are moments where, especially when you're making a piece of technology, whether it's like, for a big investor pitch or whatever, there's moments where the software has to work.
Yeah.
There's no option.
Right.
You know all the things that are wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's like judging yourself. You're just like, this is not going to work. There's this wrong and that's wrong. And so, but Roger went for it, and then it was like 1 hour, nothing. 2 hours, nothing.
Wait, what do you mean by nothing?
No response.
No response.
Yeah,
like,
sorry. No.
He's using it possibly, but you don't know.
I knew he was. We could tell by the AWS servers that he was, because he was our only user, basically, right? So we could tell that an Evercast room was being used.
Yeah,
right?
but you didn't know what's going on, and you didn't get any feedback. So you're like wondering what the hell's happening.
At 2 hours into it, I'm just like, screw it. The director hated it, and they abandoned it, and they're on the phone now, and Roger's packing up his bags and going to Atlanta. So 3 hours goes by, and all of a sudden, Alex and myself get a text message, and it says, "Guys, meet me in my room. I sent you an invite." And so I go and sit at my desk. I click the link, and on Evercast, there's a pre-room. So before you go live, you can check your hair, check your mic, like a typical video conference, I think. And I'm like sitting there, my finger is like shaking, and I'm about to click the go live button. And I'm like, well, this is one of those moments where this is going to be a very pivotal, significant moment, or in either direction, actually. So it's going to be really good or really bad. And we go in, and he's got this look on his face, and I'm like, it doesn't look like bad, but it doesn't look good. And he goes, guys, it was a home run.
Nice.
He loved it.
Nice.
He loved it so much that he told me I can stay in Santa Monica and cut the film.
That's awesome.
So for the next few months, they, while the director was in Atlanta, they used it every day for hours. They would use it in the morning before the director started shooting. They would use it in the evening when the director went home after having dinner and stuff, and it allowed the director at his own time to just hop into the room with Evercast, or hop into the Evercast room with Roger and just do their thing, right? And so that went on for like 4 or 5 months. The project ended.
Well, okay, before you say that went on for 4 or 5 months, your thinking is that we got Roger. This is going to be the thing that opens up the floodgates, and we're going to start getting revenue.
100%.
And then next months, not much had changed.
Well, because the one thing I didn't account for was the change of habit.
Right. People are doing this in person.
Yep.
Like no one's.
They're either doing it in person or they're using other types of software that aren't real time. They're all file based.
Right.
Where they'll upload a file, the director will review the file at their own time, and then they go back and leave notes, and then the editor goes and executes on the notes. Again, everything that I was trying to solve. With my previous company, they are used to it. That's just what they do. And so I didn't account for that. And so Roger, has a successful session, uses it for 5 months, and then he ends up taking 9 months off of professional editing to go and put his name on the line and introduce it to all the influential studio execs and directors and stuff, right? So
that's a huge break.
That was a big break, you know, and this will lead up to the COVID story, right? Because this is an important part of it. So he started introducing it. We were doing lots of demos. I was oftentimes hopping on a Southwest flight and going to LA for a few days every week. Because him and I were kind of like tag teaming it together while Alex, the other founder, was back in Phoenix taking care of like the investment side of stuff, and him and I were tag teaming that. So I was bouncing between trying to pitch it to studios and then also raising capital.
Yeah.
And so what happened was you know, we ended up getting a lot of interest, like a lot of interest in the fact that people understood the value that it could bring. You know, it's the value of, listen, a director lives in Malibu. I mean, it doesn't have to be oceans apart, right?
Right.
It's the director living in Malibu, the cutting room is in Burbank. That's a 90-minute drive each way.
LA, a 5-mile commute could be a hour commute, essentially.
Yeah. So that's 3 hours of time that the director could have back just in their own personal life, or put that time towards the actual project, right? So I think everyone really understood the value proposition. But again, it's
the habits.
Oh, it is just the habits. It's like, you know, I mean, I'm a G Suite user. Our whole company's on Google, the workspaces, right? And there might be something out there that's so much better than Gmail, and it's just that you get caught in your habits, and it takes something to happen for you to go and try something new, right?
Right.
One more break that we have.
Because you've already solved that problem. You don't want to re-solve the problem that you've already solved.
That's exactly. Even though you solved the problem, but now you have a thing where the problem that you solved isn't efficient as it could be. And that when you add more efficiency to things like this, it actually ends up benefiting the product in the end and your own health, like your own just mental sanity, right?
Yeah.
So we were doing it, getting lots of interest, but the studios actually, I think, were more supportive of it than especially the directors. Okay. Directors are notorious for just being like, I have a certain way of doing things. This is how I do it. Yeah. Don't want to touch it, right?
Creatives. They're very difficult to work with.
They can be very difficult to work with. Okay.
But they're also amazing people.
And that's, you know, we'll get into that too. But I mean, everyone who I've interacted with in the industry, you know, the biggest directors and so forth, and the biggest actors, most of them, honestly, are just awesome. Like, they're really cool, down-to-earth people. You got a few who are outliers that you don't really want to have a conversation with, but for the most part, everyone's really neat. But so we had 2 big breaks before COVID that I actually think contributed to what happened after COVID, right? So the first one was, do you remember the show Chernobyl on HBO, right? Yeah. So we didn't even know this. We knew they were our customer. They were one of our first customers. And at the time, we had no idea, but they basically had a team. I think the director was in New York, the writer, Craig Mazin, who's a well-known writer. He was in LA. The editorial team was in the UK. The VFX team was somewhere else, right? And we had no idea, but they literally made the entire miniseries through Evercast remotely.
Wow.
No one really ever sat with each other. They did the whole thing remotely, even like the sound mixing and stuff for the soundtrack. So when we found that out, and then the reason how we found that out is because Craig, I think it was his podcast or he was on a podcast, but he's like, hey, I'd like to give a shout out to the software that we use to make the show called Evercast.
What an amazing, that must have made you guys feel everything is worth it. All the pain, suffering.
But back to what my earlier statement, which is that, you know, there are times, there's things that you think are going to be the thing that like catapults you, right?
Right.
Still the same issue where it's just, he had a success with it. Right. And again, every creative has a different tolerance level of change, right? Some of them are maybe more progressive than others, right? So we just happened to find the one director, writer, producer who was very progressive and looking for something like this. So for him, it worked out.
Not to mention, like, Chernobyl was such a great show.
Oh, man.
You're like, we're going to be able to coast on the tails of this thing.
And you have no idea how amazing it felt, like, watching the miniseries going, me and my small team
had a part in this.
We had it was actually a very serious part in it, right? So that whole thing was really cool. But again, same problem. People just aren't changing. Another one who seemed to be really progressive on it was Tom Cruise.
Okay.
So they started using it at the beginning of when they started filming the new Top Gun, which hasn't been released yet. And then same thing. They pretty much made the bulk of the movie all through Evercast, you know.
Wow.
And being a young kid, when I was a young kid, Top Gun was my favorite movie, right?
Yeah.
I dressed up as Maverick for Halloween, and I still have a picture. I actually sent it to the production team. I had the jacket, the glasses, and everything.
Yeah.
But
That's awesome.
so I was really proud of that. That like a movie that I grew up with as a kid, the sequel, 30 years later or whatever it was, all of a sudden is now my software has played a massive role in making this blockbuster movie. So we were getting some, big wins like that, but still going up against that current of just old habits die hard.
Yeah.
But what happened is all those 2 years of just struggling so bad, and all the travel and all the studio executive meetings and the director meetings and the just so many things that had to happen, and it wasn't producing quite the results that we were hoping for. But if we didn't do those things, if we didn't take the time, if we didn't keep the company alive during that very crucial part, when COVID hit, no one would have ever known about us.
Right. Luck favors the prepared, and you guys were like the most prepared at the moment that it mattered most.
Absolutely. So when COVID hit, and I will never forget the day, it was March 8th. March 8th, I don't remember what day it was, but we walked into the office, and we were looking at, we use HubSpot for our CRM, right? And so when I'm looking at HubSpot, I'm like, man, that's a big spike in like inbound traffic and inbound leads. And now we have all the contact sales are starting to come in, right? And by March 12th, it just became this flood of onboardings.
Wow.
And all that time we spent when COVID hit, everyone in the industry was like, oh, what do we do?
Yeah.
Well,
and
what was
Roger has been putting the word out about your software, and like the Chernobyl people are putting out the word about your software.
Just all these little things added up. So when COVID hit, it was like, what was that
that crazy software that Roger was talking about, or whoever.
Yeah. People, what's Overcast? Overcast, I think it was called, right? No, it's Evercast. So that all that time leading up to that, when COVID hit, people in the industry at least heard of us.
Right.
And the space shuttle took off. And it was just
amazing.
an absolute flood. And looking back on it now, and when you're caught in these crazy moments, whether it's the extreme struggle or this extreme explosion of business, right? I'm trying, especially now, I'm trying to do a better job of just being a little bit more present and appreciating the journey more.
Right.
Because now when I look back on the struggle that we had leading up to COVID, I appreciate the hell out of it because it turned me into a different person.
Right.
I'm a different business person. I'm light years smarter than I was from my previous company, especially when it comes to business and stuff. So I wish I would have maybe appreciated that journey a little bit more while I was in it. And it was the same thing.
You're still in it.
Yeah, I'm still in it. Oh yeah, but I'm just trying to now.
Better late than never. I mean, it's funny, that old adage of "it's the journey, not the destination" is so true.
100%. And sometimes, especially when you're not experienced with that. And this goes out to like younger entrepreneurs, right? Like it's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and the craziness of what it takes to even have a shot.
Yeah.
The slightest shot of doing something successful, right? That I just really, like, looking back on that blow up moment, it was basically me, Roger, Alex. We had like Tyrell, Emily, Todd, Robert, just a very few amount of people. Marcy came in, who was our CMO, and then we had like maybe 4 devs. Three devs, I think, or something. It was ridiculous.
Right.
It was under 10 people in the company. And the fact that we all somehow onboarded, I don't remember how many. It was so many. I mean, I'll never forget, like, Tyrell, who was our first employee. Tyrell is sitting there onboarding people and teaching them how to use the software. I'm both onboarding and doing tech support because I had the most experience with all the issues that come up when you do a thing like this. And then Alex was pacing back and forth in the office trying to take phone calls and handle the sales. And Marcy was trying to take all the sales calls and stuff. And, just everyone who was involved at that time was, I love you guys, and it's amazing to go through that experience with these people,
right,
and come out on the other end, and especially with the technology side of things. So not only did we handle it from like an administrative side of things, but the fact that we built something that when you build technology, you always intend for it to be scalable because that's ultimately what your goal is. But you don't really know whether something's going to actually scale or not. So I wouldn't say that our platform was built the best because we had lots of technical debt. we were kind of learning as we went, kind of thing, right? Especially when you're building something that's a little more R&D-ish like this. You don't really know if you're doing it fully right or whatever. So
there's no best practices because no one's done it before. No best practices.
Yeah, that's exact. We're doing lots of things that no one's done before. So the fact that the platform held up with the increase in business that it had is truly amazing. It's just short of a miracle, actually.
That's awesome.
Like the fact that we didn't find that one, 200 customers was fine. 201, bam.
All of them collapsed.
All of them collapsed. And I'll never forget, talking about collapsing, we did have a few outages, not as many as you think we would have, but there was one outage in particular. I was in LA. I was at Roger's house, and that was actually one of the nice things is that throughout all that time that I was traveling to LA, he gave me a bedroom at his house. And so I didn't have to stay at hotels. That was definitely amazing because I didn't have to deal with the whole hotel thing.
Right.
And I was at his house. We had a major outage. Something, I don't remember exactly what happened, but long story short, it was down for 2 hours. So another way to realize how important your software is when it goes down.
And you happen to be at the home of the film editor.
Of the guy who put his ass on the line for us. It was so bad. I mean, directors are super angry, and obviously when the director gets angry, the producers get angry, and if they're not angry at you,
right.
I took it as a compliment.
But it's this unknown of when is this thing going to be back up?
Totally.
Everyone's basically worthless until it is, right?
Totally. And imagine, Slack can go down, Gmail can go down. It's an inconvenience, but it's not going to ruin your day. You can get around without it for a while, right? But when you're using something like Evercast, where literally it is the work tool that a team is using to create something like a movie, you are disrupting creativity.
Right.
You are disrupting. They literally can't. They have to stop. The editor, it just puts them at a complete stop until it works again. So, I mean, it was terrifying, but it was also that was a moment where I realized that and this is before COVID.
Okay.
That was the moment where I realized that what we have something here. We definitely have something.
At this point, were you guys cash flow positive? What was the sort of financial aspect of this? So take us back to February of 2020. Is the financial aspects of the company such that you're okay, we've made it over the hurdle. We're close to $1 million or at $1 million of ARR. We're paying our expenses. We're going to survive and live through. Or were you guys, or was that still a question?
We were doing, if I remember correctly, it was 45 or, sure. So actually, come to think of it, we were doing much less than, now that I'm putting the numbers in my head, we were doing much less than $1 million run rate. Okay. We were probably more at 75,000, or no more, I'm sorry, less than that. We were at 55,000 a month, I think.
Okay.
Give or take.
In February of 2020.
In February of 2020.
So you're not paying for all of your expenses through revenue yet?
Oh, no.
Okay, so
oh, no.
It's taken 4 years to get to 55. Is the notion that you guys might have to either do another raise or shut down? What are the discussions within the sort of founding team? You have two co-founders, you said?
So yeah, technically we had 4 total. We had one founder early on who, for personal reasons, had to kind of disconnect from the project. He's still best friends with him, Blake.
3 people.
Shout out to Blake. But Blake, it was basically start off with me, Blake, and Alex.
Okay.
Blake had to kind of step away.
Roger came in.
Roger wasn't made co-founder initially.
Okay.
But once we started seeing what he was doing and how he was, helping the cause,
right,
it just made sense.
Right.
That when he's going into these studios, and the fact that he was at the time, he was our second largest investor too.
Okay.
Right. Put in $500,000. And so it just made sense that it would give him more credibility if he was walking into the studios and saying, hey,
I helped make this company.
Exactly. Because it's all, especially in the walled garden of Hollywood, it's all about trust.
Right.
So that definitely, he deserved it. He's a huge reason why we are here. And so there was 4 of us initially. But now it's primarily just the 3 of us.
Okay, so 3 of you in February. What are those discussions? February 2020,
yep.
COVID. What are you guys still how should we do this thing? Should we go raise around? What is the discussion?
I mean, we're trying to figure out. That's I think the biggest challenge that any entrepreneur has to face is you're oftentimes tested in how much you believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that, when you've raised now $3 or $4 million and you're still not getting that lift that you really need, which means you're not getting the validation that you need, which means that are you really creating something that people want? And at the same time, when you go in front of investors, you have to put on the face of, hey, everything is perfectly fine. And, that's one of the things that, especially now that I look back on it and into the future when, I am now crossing over to being on the other side of the table, right? Where I would like to start being an investor at some point into startups. You start questioning yourself, like, am I stealing money from this person? Do I believe in this much where I'm going to go and ask for money from this person, even though I know all the things that are going wrong and what's not happening? And, when you raise capital, it's an interesting balance, right? Because on one hand, you don't want to lie. I don't believe in lying.
Right.
But on the other hand, you can't be 100% truthful either. Otherwise, people just don't invest.
You have to be an optimist.
An optimist. That's exactly right. Yeah. So but it is a very fine line, right? So, so we were getting at those moments where it was, something's got to happen here, because just from a mental health standpoint, there's no way I can continue with this uncertainty. I've dealt with uncertainty for such a long time, but when you've got everything leveraged to the max. Right. Credit cards. I mean, I was personally guaranteeing the credit cards and personally guaranteeing, like, we were seeing, we were owing people money, and anytime we would raise like $50K here or $100K there, we're just basically using it to pay down some people that debt we owe. Exactly. So it's just, if you choose to be an entrepreneur and you go through with it and you start having some success, just because the success isn't in the form of necessarily the revenue you're looking for, I think an indicator of potential success is when the universe or whatever starts testing you. It's like, okay, you want this? Well, how bad do you want it? Because now you have to continue raising the fuel for your company, which is capital, but at the same time, you're doubting it, aren't you? Oh yeah, right. You're doubting it. And so it's like this, it's just it's an internal struggle. I mean, I don't know if other people have gone through this. Me personally, I'm speaking from my own experiences, right? It's that struggle of sitting in front of someone and really looking deep within and going, I still believe in what we're creating. Therefore, I can justify sitting in front of this person, be optimistic, continue forward, and try to raise the capital, right? So we were getting to that point where it was something would have to break. Otherwise, we'd maybe go and try to find a partner or something, or, you don't always have to completely fold up shop right away, but yeah. We were starting to entertain some creative options.
Right.
And then it happened, and it completely changed
overnight. And yeah. Like what? So fast forward to mid-March, you guys are like trying to stay like on top of all the inbound inquiries that you're getting. Was that moment like, oh, this is the turnaround point? Did you guys realize that this is happening and it's really going to propel Evercast? Or were you just sort of like, oh, this might be a 1 week thing? Or what were your thoughts back then?
I think the moment that Arizona shut down was the moment that I realized that, like, this was going to be a thing that was going to go on for a while. Now, there was still uncertainty behind, like,
how long and if this... But it provided an opportunity for people to sit back and reevaluate their processes. And that's what sort of you were excited about. Because this is like when people are going to reevaluate, hey, am I doing things the most efficient way?
Yep.
Anyway, even if I can go back to work in 2 weeks, do I want to be using in-person meetings as opposed to using Evercast?
That's right. Well, and even the studios have been resisting the cloud, right? I mean, like, take remote collaboration, just put it aside a second. They've been resisting the cloud in the sense that, all their assets, an asset being like when, everything good? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's okay. An asset being something that when you film all this footage, you have assets. They're video files, basically, right?
Yeah.
And up until basically COVID, most of those files were always living on local hard drives at the editor's workstation or in a server room at the studio, right? So they resisted the cloud for quite a long time because just all the security implications. It's one thing to do like this like live streaming thing that we do. It's another thing when you start uploading actual assets to the cloud.
Yeah.
If that cloud gets compromised, you're getting the next movie.
Yeah.
Right. So they resisted it, and then all of a sudden, obviously, COVID hit, and they were forced to not only find solutions like ours to do the actual collaborating part of it, but also how do you get the assets, the storing, and where do you put all the assets and stuff? So, I mean, basically two things ended up happening. You had some studios that were already working on cloud initiatives, so they just went full force with that, Yep. And then you had other studios that weren't really proactive on that before COVID, so they were literally shipping up, securing hard drives, and escorting them over to the editor's house.
Wow.
And the third option is they would have a PC at the studio, and the editor was remote controlling it through like a remote control type of service, right?
Right.
And there are some really good ones now too that are different than TeamViewer or anything like that. I mean, like ones that are super low latency. It pretty much feels like you're right there
on the machine.
Yeah. So that was pretty much the three choices. And so so they were forced into adopting this new cloud thing. And then what happened was, I think for me, so, as we're having this explosion, I would say 90 days goes by, and it's not stopping. It just keeps going, right? And, you're all of a sudden, all the VCs are reaching out, and we're talking to all of them, and they're just saying, you're COVID preferred. You're a COVID preferred investment. However, are you COVID lifted? Which basically is a negative, which means that when COVID goes away, are you going to go away, right?
Like all this demand is going to go away because now COVID is not a thing and people are back to in person.
That's exactly right. And what they weren't seeing is that we were talking to like the studio executives and stuff, and and not only that, but more importantly, we were talking to the creatives very carefully,
right?
And trying to get like an unbiased, like how do you feel about this,
right?
And
is this a Band-Aid or do you feel like this is better?
Exactly.
Right? Like that's the big difference. If it's a Band-Aid, when COVID goes away, well, you rip off the Band-Aid because now you're healed, you go back to work.
That's exactly right.
But if this is better, then you're going to keep it.
You're going to keep it, right. And unanimously, what we got back, the feedback we were getting back was, I can't wait for this to end. COVID.
Yeah.
I can't wait to sometimes go back in, but this will not be leaving our workflow because that means that if the producer can't come in for a day, they're not going to lose any time. They can hop in. They could be sick in their pajamas and hop in. Or again, the director example. This is the biggest example where the directors oftentimes do not live close to like Burbank or Studio City or where all the action's happening.
Right.
So the director can live in Malibu. The director can live in Santa Barbara.
And these are highly successful people whose time commitments are extremely
oh my gosh.
The time is the one thing that you don't have enough of,
you don't have enough of it. And I think that's the thing that COVID pointed out the most for everyone.
Yeah.
So as anyone who's like traveled in LA traffic for 3 hours and stuff like that.
Not sure what's going on with this.
The GoPro is
getting too hot.
Is it? Okay, I'm going to turn it off real quick. No worries.
What's going on, GoPro?
Speaking of when we need it, we find out.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
It happens.
Sorry about that.
I've seen it happen on set too.
I mean, we still have 2 other camera angles, so we're good.
Perfect.
We're good.
Hi.
Yeah, exactly.
There's time is something you can't get back. And, outside of Hollywood, just talking to people in general who don't work in the business, just people who are just using Zoom and stuff. I think, Zoom fatigue is one thing, but no one is in a rush to get back to sitting in on the 101 or the 405 in LA and sit there for an hour to an hour and a half just to get to work and then another hour and a half back. I mean, sometimes you have to do that, but you don't, with the type of technology that we have now between Evercast and Zoom and Skype and everything else, right? You don't have to do it all the time.
Right.
And it's not like an imperative where you have to go in, right? So I think what I'm hoping comes out of this, not just for, the industry that we serve and the creatives that we serve, but just a world in general, is that time is important. It's the only thing you can't get back.
Right.
So use it wisely. And sitting in traffic is not using it wisely.
Yeah.
Not just personally because it's your time, but also like a company. I would rather, like me personally, we were remote first before even going into COVID. So when COVID hit, it was a struggle, but it's like I like the fact that we're all remote. I like the fact that, hey, a person can come in if they want, or they can stay at home. They still get the job done. as long as you have your KPIs in place and you know what that person's role is and everyone knows what that role is and stuff, there's things that you can do. They're just, the people are just happier, honestly.
Yeah.
They're happier. So, but for me, even with all that stuff and what people were saying about us and that they were, this is going to be a part of our workflow forever. The first time I saw this is what really hit me. And that was, we were reading an article. What we are starting to find, and we started to see this like in July or August, was a lot of articles where they were referring to Evercast like they would refer to Zoom. They don't link out to us. It's like they're interviewing a director or something, and it's just like, oh yeah, so we used Evercast for blah blah blah.
Right.
But just like as a,
it's like an afterthought.
Like an afterthought.
Obviously, everyone uses Evercast.
Yeah,
right?
I'm Zooming with my grandma. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I started seeing not just one but many articles popping up like that, I was like, okay,
That's awesome.
that is
What
pretty,
a great feeling.
yeah,
Huh?
oh, geez, like it's like. But then, well, it's funny. Like there's a moment where you stop and you get that like sigh of relief, right? And then all of a sudden, it's scale time. Yeah, it's now you had to deal with all the things that are related to scale. You want to keep scaling. You're trying to capture more market share. You're trying to just evolve the product, make the product better and better and better. So you just you go from one challenge to another.
So you're 1 year later. You're past 10 million ARR. You just did a round that you closed.
Yep.
I wasn't able to get in on it, but
Yep,
that's okay. I still wish you guys the most success. That's awesome.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
How much did you guys raise?
4
million.
4 million in a safe.
Okay, and pretty nice valuation, I presume. Can you
Well,
discuss it?
Sure. I don't mind talking about it. Yeah. So for any of you that don't know what a safe is, it's a simple agreement for future equity, right?
Okay.
It's a kind of a fancy convertible note that came out of Silicon Valley, and pretty much what it is that we don't know what we're worth yet.
Yep.
And we're not claiming to. It keeps going up every day, honestly, as all these big enterprise deals that we're closing and our revenue's going up, right? So what it is that it allows you to bring in cash where there's a cap or a discount depending on what happens. So if you raise, like if we go out and raise capital from a big, growth equity firm or VC firm in the future, and let's say we go out and we raise 10 or 20 million at a $100 million valuation, let's just say, right?
Yep.
The safe cap was at $50 million.
Okay.
Right? Which means that that's a sweet deal.
Yeah.
That's going to convert at 50 while they're converting, while they're getting equity at 100 million, right?
Right.
On the opposite side, if for some reason we're not able to raise capital at a higher valuation and we end up raising capital below a $50 million valuation, then they get a 10% discount
From that,
whatever that valuation is. So it's
Gotcha.
kind of like it's a way to just kind of sit and wait and see what happens, but also pull in capital.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's not on our books as debt.
Congratulations. And that round is closed?
Yep,
Or
it's closed, and we are, we brought in some pretty influential people, brought in a big YouTuber.
Okay.
Brought in,
Can you say the YouTubers?
I can't.
No?
That's
Okay.
I would love to, but I can't. but I will say that the reason why he invested is the same reason he saw what the problem that we're solving for the prosumer market, like the YouTuber market and the indie market and stuff. It's the same problem that we're solving for Hollywood. Maybe, if anything, more, right? I mean, the fact that he basically spends a lot of time coaching up-and-coming YouTubers, and part of the coaching process is saying, listen, you can't edit your stuff. You have to be the one focused on creating the content while you hire editors anywhere in the world, and you can use a piece of software like Evercast to connect you to those talent, right? So,
Right.
And back to the Hollywood thing, too, I'll never forget when we had, I can't say the name of the show, but a big TV show who was leveraging editors. It's a children's show. Leveraging editors in like Jordan.
Wow.
Super talented editors in Jordan, who would have never had the opportunity to work on a big production like that.
Right.
What does Evercast enable you to do? It didn't matter.
That's awesome.
So I mean, we're that's the reason why he came in, and we've got, out of all the rounds we've done, we've raised now a little over $10 million since 2015.
Okay.
But all the money that came in this last round is pretty influential.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome.
It was nice to have it done in like 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, like, first of all, this is like I can't think of a better example. And by the way, your revenue growth starting with $1 million might be the largest revenue growth of any company in Arizona that I know
might
about.
be.
Like 1,000% is pretty, like, people are happy with, 30% revenue growth year over year, right? 1,000%, that's pretty nuts.
It's crazy to think that way. And it's crazy to think that, I love Arizona. I love living here. And I wish there's some good tech stuff going on here, but I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves.
Yeah.
But it's neat knowing that.
I couldn't agree more, by the way, which is why I'm doing this.
No, that's why I'm like, I have to be on this show. This is amazing because me and one of my great employees, Tyrell, him and I always talk about how, we want to be a part of the Silicon Desert, right? There's so many reasons to live here, and there's so many reasons to start a business here. You can see all the Californians flocking in now, right? But there's just so many reasons to be in business here. The talent's really great, but it doesn't matter because now the talent is all over the world, so you can leverage that, right?
It's the quality of living now.
The quality of living's amazing here, and to be honest with you,
great weather, no disasters.
Nope, it's truly incredible, and the fact that it's amazing how you're right. I mean, Evercast may be one of the fastest growing companies in Phoenix that no one knows about.
Right.
And we're in this little tiny office.
I had never heard of you guys until I think after the announcement is when Terrell pinged me.
That's right. He's the one that got a hold of you.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, it's cool that we're kind of stealth, but I do want to start getting out there more because I do want to encourage more entrepreneurship and tech, especially in the tech side of things in Phoenix. I'm all about it. I think it's I hope to see it more.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say is this is the most perfect example of luck favoring the prepared. I mean, there's so much preparation and hard work to get you guys to where you were in March of 2020 for the luck aspect, which you had no idea would just hit. But you've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. You mentioned you've had failures.
Oh.
What do you? Which one of those failures do you want to talk about, or which one of the companies do you want to talk about that maybe taught you the most?
So two in particular. The first one was the very first company I started, which was a company called Singles Depot, and I had an idea for a singles website. And one of the ideas I had as part of the singles website was a thing called vPhoto, where basically you would leverage the Walgreens passport photos as a way of getting a notarized picture of yourself. And any profile that had this notarized V photo would be more elevated, and people would have more interest in it because they would know that this person's not uploading a photo that was from high school, because that was a big problem back then, is people just uploading pictures that were 10 years old, and that's not the person that they are now, right?
Okay.
And so I don't even remember how I did it, but I've always been good at talking to people, right? That's been one of my specialties. When I graduated high school, I didn't even go to college. I went and worked. I got certified by Microsoft to be an instructor. I think at the time I was the youngest Microsoft instructor in the world at 19, and I was teaching classes.
On what?
MCSE, network administrating and security.
I had an MCSE certification.
There
as
you
well.
go. Yeah. So I was an MCSE and I was an MCT, so Microsoft certified trainer. Yeah. And so I was teaching at I think the company was called Executive Train or ExecuTrain, I think it was called. And so I was 19 and just killing it, making great money. And so that was, I've always been really good at just getting up in front of people and talking. So I somehow got a hold of someone at Walgreens, which led to me, and by the way, I lived in Illinois at the time because I grew up in Chicago. So it led to me going to the Walgreens headquarters, which is in Chicago, giving a pitch, and they loved it.
Okay. What was the pitch?
Pitch was, hey, the singles market is, the online singles market is ginormous, even back then.
What year is this?
This would be 2002.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. Yes, it had to be 2002. So it's 2002. Singles market is ginormous, but there's a problem. I think I have a way where it's a revenue generating thing for Walgreens. It's another thing that they can generate revenue from by leveraging an already existing infrastructure that they already have, which is passport photos.
Okay.
And so I went back 3 times and met with different executives every time, right? And I think it was the third meeting where I walked out into the parking lot, and I so vividly remember this, thinking, I'm 22 years old. I'm going to be a millionaire. This was easy.
Right.
Like, yeah, you know? And I'll never forget that literally a day later, they called me up and said their legal team shot it down.
And that just crushed your
that
millionaire status.
Oh man, I thought I had it. I'm like, man, this entrepreneur stuff's easy. What is everyone talking about, you know? And
right.
So it didn't work out, and it was just one of those moments where I look back on it now and go, man, Brad, you still have like 18 years left to go.
Yeah. If you were talking to yourself at 22. But you know what? Here's the funny thing is that if they hadn't shut it down, you could have potentially become a millionaire overnight.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
But
I think like this is what is kind of amazing, because based on sheer like the number of experimentations that are happening in the world, right? There's like a lot of those 22-year-old Brads that, you know, like the vast majority of them are not becoming millionaires.
Sure.
But there's a few that are. And what happens to some of those people is they think, oh, my hard work and genius and thinking and like my perseverance allowed me to become this sort of like super wealthy person, or like my success is self-made. And I think that, yes, it's self-made, but it's dismissing and discounting the luck factor, the fact that that lawyer didn't shut it down, or you know, in your case, they did shut it down or whatever, right?
Well,
like,
I mean, it's like the old saying, some people do step in SH exclamation mark,
right?
So it's like, yeah, I mean, there are times where, hey, you do get lucky, for sure.
Yeah.
And people win the lotto. It happens, you know? But I think, you know, back to the success thing, being an entrepreneur isn't about being a millionaire.
Yeah.
It's about doing something that you're proud of, one. But two, recalibrating what we look at as success when it comes to an entrepreneur. If you are an entrepreneur and you are making enough money to be sustainable, you're a success. You are already just doing that.
Couldn't agree more.
You are a step above everyone else.
But let me ask you this though, because you know, like you were on the verge of essentially this incredible success at 22. Looking back at it now, are you glad that they sort of shut it down?
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because if that would have been my moment and it would have been that easy, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I look back at how naive I was back then.
That's so awesome.
And how much I didn't know. And now I still don't know everything. I know a lot more.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy with who I am and how I view the world and how I see just, you know, humankind and stuff. Like I'm a more well-rounded person that's much wiser than I was, but I still know when to shut up and listen.
Yeah, that's so great. Okay, so sorry to have cut you off there, but like now let's get the rest of the story, because you know, you got crushed, and then what do you do next? And
so then so that was 2002, 3. So let's say like I'm folding Singles Depot. I think it was like 2003, and then I was just doing some really basic stuff. Like I owned like a small web design company. You know, again, a knock on wood, I've been able to always make enough money to survive. So I was, in all sense of the things, I was a success in the sense that I didn't have to go out and get a job, right? Okay. So I did I did that. I even got involved with a technology company that was based out of LA. They were doing some really advanced voice controlled navigation stuff. And I because of the experience that I gained doing that, or doing the website stuff, and then before the technology thing, I also tried opening a fashion e-commerce store. Okay. Right. Had a great idea. Didn't do too bad, but that e-com experience led me to working with this technology company where I ended up selling, you know, millions of dollars of their nav systems that weren't even in like Best Buy or anything like that. I mean, they were like, it was a new technology, very cool stuff. Made them a lot of money, but they ended up taking a lot of money from me because I was reinvesting back into the company. And this is, you know, another, just one of the lessons you learn. It's just amazing how when people are dishonest and people are, greed's you know what. And so that really fell apart. That was my first experience of watching a company implode from the inside purely because of the leadership in the company, primarily one person, the CEO. So that was really Can
you say the company or?
No, just because there's still things going on with it. But it was, I mean, they still owe me. They owe my mom. Because my mom, like,
invested in it.
Oh, she took a home equity loan out on her house. Like, it was, I just learned, it's really unfortunate, and it was so not necessary.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from that. And then that pretty much led me into meeting Blake. Met Blake. And me and so I actually knew his best friend, Brandon. So Brandon and I became friends here. Brandon moved here from Oregon. We became great friends. He's like, hey, you got to meet this guy Blake. And long story short, we ended up starting this company called Creative.
Okay.
And Creative was the idea was it was going to be this social media platform for creatives, and that we believe that creativity was one of the very few things in our world that unites humankind versus all the things in our world that want to divide us, right? So we wanted to create this social media platform, and this was the first time where I've ever gone out, and either same with them. I've never raised significant capital in my life, so this is the first time where the $1 million capital mark actually came into play.
Right.
And so we, Blake knew some people in Oregon, and he was a big part in raising the first initial part of that capital, and we raised some serious capital, and we went for it, right? Had a great idea and a lot of support behind it, like beautiful. Just seeing like creatives around the world come together and really get behind our mission was incredible. I mean, they were doing one of the most impactful things, I think, was that there was we started what we called the creative movement. And we had like ambassadors in all these countries, and it was in Pakistan where they had a creative, like with it was creative without the E at the end. So it was creativ.com, right? And they did a whole festival for us.
Wow.
And all these celebrities from Pakistan came to this art exhibit, and these artists came, and it was this huge ordeal. And to see that take place was just, it was amazing. And like we would send out these wristbands that said, I am a creative. And we had them translated into, I think it was like 12 or 13 different languages. And we sent out thousands and thousands of these all around the world, and just seeing the love that we were getting. However, we were having a difficult time building the product. And then when we got the product built, it was all about monetization and stealing timeshare from Facebook, stealing timeshare from Twitter, Yeah. So these are all the things that, again, hindsight's 2020. Looking back on it now, it's like, okay, yeah, like, looking back on it now, we would have started a YouTube channel, maybe like a media blog or something, and we probably would have crushed it.
Right.
But trying to go the route of building our own technology and wanting to have our own creative platform, that was the mistake.
Where everyone's expecting a free product, essentially,
Yep.
that's ad-supported.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to compete with Facebook.
Yep. And it was near the end of Creative when we figured out that we have all this content on our platform. We had a decent amount of content, and we had like 2 million followers on Facebook. But unfortunately, with Facebook, and any of you that know Facebook, yeah, you have 2 million followers, but they restrict your reach. So all that time we spent building this amazing following on Facebook, it's like having a newsletter where you don't have access to all the email addresses.
Yeah.
Unless you pay.
Right.
So we, ultimately speaking, we still had all this content that was coming to us, and so we ended up trying out a magazine, a super, super high quality magazine that we would try to sell at Barnes & Noble. And we took all the best creatives from the platform and would do stories on them in this magazine and then sell it in the store. And that's actually when I met Alex, my current business partner. So Alex came in originally as an advisor. Restaurant, Pita Jungle.
Oh, okay.
We used to always go to Pita Jungle on Shea there. And one of the servers there, he's like, hey, I love what you're doing at Creative. You got to meet this guy, Alex. He's a inventor. He started a successful company. Maybe he could help you guys like advise or something. And so we met him. Alex and I and Blake, we all three of us immediately hit it off. So Blake and I brought him in as an advisor. And then he ended up taking on more of an active role because of his experience in building things and doing that type of stuff. So he helped us create this magazine where like the front of the cover was embossed. So like we had a panda on one of the issues. Sorry. And the panda like was embossed, so it popped out of the cover.
That's pretty cool.
And only one person that I know of in the world could do that, and that's Alex. Alex
wow.
is he's got an engineer's mind. You know, the device that he built many years ago, that the successful company that he owned, you know, a widget. He's just really good at doing widgets and stuff. So he knew all the manufacturers in Phoenix to get the magazine done. So he ended up playing a major role, and he got us distribution at Barnes & Noble.
Wow.
And kind of a quick story was, I'll never forget, our second magazine came out. And by law, you have to have an address in the magazine as a place of business. So we had our Gainey Ranch address there, as we were also at the Gainey Ranch. I've been at the Gainey for a long time. So this person comes walking into our office and looking around. I'm like, hey, can I help you? And she goes, I just had to come see you guys because this is the most amazing magazine I've ever seen.
Like the high quality.
The high
of the
quality,
print.
and I couldn't believe it was in Phoenix. So
funny.
came from Phoenix. I came down from Tempe. I had to check it out. And we won like a few awards, like big awards too. And we started monetizing it. But unfortunately, I don't blame them. But our biggest investor, who put in quite a like $3.5-4 million, he decided it was time to cut the cord.
Yeah.
And he cut the cord, and that was at that moment we had a layoff. I think at the time we had like 30 employees. That was a very rough, just everything, so much learned from that experience.
Yeah.
And now what's crazy to me, going full circle, is we went through all that with creative, and now fast forward to present day 2021, here we are, where our mission is creating the best remote collaboration platform for creatives.
Right.
So it's, in a way, it's like we found a purpose.
Yeah.
And
that journey required those failures in between
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
The overnight success that happened in the last year required, first of all, 4 years of the company.
Well, it's like Kevin Hart. He has a shirt that says, I'm a 15-year overnight success.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it's like the Steve Jobs video. You ever seen the one where he talks about connecting the dots?
Yeah. Yeah,
So true.
The Stanford speech.
The Stanford
I
speech.
love that speech.
Oh, man.
I've probably watched it a dozen times.
Oh yeah, I have it on replay at the office. No,
That's awesome.
but no, seriously, like it's so true. You connect the dots, and if you, again, about being wiser, if the wiser you get, and you do start connecting the dots, what you realize is that you start recognizing where you're at, and you can't tell the future, but you can start putting patterns together, and you start recognizing things, and so.
And you start accepting the sort of failures of the now a lot better.
Yes.
And almost embracing them to some extent.
And that's one of the reasons why I love having someone like Alex as my business partner, because he's such a seasoned entrepreneur. Like the school of hard knocks, man. He's been through it, right? He's started 2 successful companies, and both of them weren't easy. And it's always great to have him there as a reminder to me, because sometimes I forget.
Yeah.
I get so caught up in, especially being the chief operating officer, where I'm so busy trying to like bring the company together and make it operate successfully. And I'm technically also CFO as well. And I get so caught up sometimes in the everyday of it. And I start, all of a sudden the demons in your head, the negative demons in your head start floating around. And I love the fact that he always brings me back to earth with reason and wisdom.
Yeah.
And so I'm really thankful to have gone through this experience and having a seasoned guy like Alex on my side. And he brings to the table some amazing traits, and I bring to the table some incredible traits. And together, that's, I think, what makes us an amazing partnership, is because, he's an older guy, so he has all this like amazing business experience from the past, along with just being an incredibly smart person. And then there's me, where I have a lot of the newer knowledge, let's say, so to speak. I'm not knocking him in any way, but like together, combined.
Yeah, you have different strengths essentially, and weaknesses, and they balance each other out, which is fantastic.
Extremely well, and we never go to bed angry. Yeah. we're really good at that. We're really good at, like, we don't always agree, and we do have some heated arguments occasionally, not often, but I'm just always so proud that at the end, then we never go to bed mad. We always wake up the next day, we call each other, and just it's business as usual. Yeah, so I'm really happy about the relationship that I've built with Alex.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So many things there. Like some of the struggles. One of the things you talked about before, when prior to the podcast, is that some of those struggles had extreme lows. And like for founders that are going through some of that, Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
First of all? Okay.
Yeah.
So because like we've both known people who've like had these extreme lows to where it can feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it has ended in some cases in tragedies.
Tragedy, yeah.
And I know you've had personal experience to some degree with that. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and like what that was like, what triggered it, and how you cope with it, or like how you've gotten good at dealing with it, if you will.
So, okay, so I'll start with how I deal with it. How I deal with it now is that kind of this talk about time, right? Like we only have so much time. And all of our banks have a different amount of time in it, and eventually they all go to zero, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at things now as everything I do right now, honestly, it only matters in the moment, because 100 years from now, it's so much of it's so important to like cherish your friends, your family, and stuff like that, and really keep in perspective that even with business, even if you lose a lot of money and stuff like that, at the end of the day, as long as you were just honest, it doesn't matter. You're gonna win and you're gonna lose. Money comes, money goes, right? So I try to have more of that type of attitude. But I have struggled with, I wouldn't necessarily call it depression, but I have struggled just the fear of the unknown, the fear. And I don't have kids, but I do have she's my fiance. I've been engaged to her since 2014. But because it's just my mind. I want to be able to have a wedding where I can be present and not be worried about like something like some fire that I have to put out. So, but dealing with the uncertainty is very, very, very difficult. And I have seen people struggle so hard. And back when I was really going through the struggle, especially with Evercast, there were times where it got so bad that I was looking on the internet and trying to find like stories of just other entrepreneurs, and because so many times when you're going through these struggles, you oftentimes feel alone.
Yeah.
Like this is like I'm a loser. This is only happening to me. It seems like I look outside. I'm in Scottsdale. I see Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and I go to TechCrunch, and everyone's like raising $100 million, and they're billionaires. I mean, it's like
you have a very jaded world headlines.
And now it's the worst of all. Yeah. Like seeing like every company is SPACing and just doing $10 billion valuations and stuff. So.
Literally, we were just looking at like the SPAC thing is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah,
of course it is. Yeah.
I don't want to derail you.
No, but it's all part of this. Like for not just younger entrepreneurs, any entrepreneur, you have to realize that that doesn't always happen, and that struggle is you have to realize that struggle is part of the process. You almost have to like learn to love it. You almost have to learn to like embrace it. But you also have to find ways to cope with it. And so for me, one of my ways of coping with it was just trying to, on 10 o'clock on a Friday night, looking around the internet and trying to read other stories about people having their own struggles, because then it makes you feel less alone. It's like, like if you're an alcoholic and you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's like, okay, I'm with other people. I'm clearly not the only person having this problem. Oh my gosh, that person's an alcoholic because they had the same issue that I had, right? So it's just like when you realize that you're not alone, and that any problem you've had as an entrepreneur, someone else has also gone through it, right? So I definitely was trying to create some type of peace in my mind by looking for stories, and there's some great books out there, like the Ben Horowitz, who's the founder of Hard Thing About Hard Things.
That's a great book, by the way. If there's one book any founder should read.
That is the book.
That's the one.
That is definitely the book. There's actually two books, I'll say, but that one is number one for sure. And that book, this is actually a good segue into this story. So that book I actually owe it to that book for overcoming maybe one of the most difficult things that I've had to overcome with Evercast to date. And that was, I think it was like 2018. And we owed $350,000. To our developers, the Amex bill. I was borrowing money from Roger to pay off the Amex bill, and it was an absolute nightmare. And there's a line where people think they're screwed, and that's where a lot of people give up, actually.
Yeah.
But that's not actually where you should give up. There's a line where you think you're screwed, and then there's a line where you are actually screwed. But there's actually a decent amount of distance between those two lines, if you're brave enough to go through it, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened was that we were at that second line. We had to raise some capital, otherwise Evercast was over. And we actually found an investor who said he wanted to come in. After just talking, we talked to all of our existing investors. No one wanted to come in. We found someone. I'll never forget going to my fiance Amanda and telling her, "Hey, we're good. We're fine. I'm gonna be able to pay myself, a few grand, and we're good. We can eat and blah blah blah." The next day, when the subscription agreement was supposed to come, it never came. And so we called, and this guy said, "Well, I'm bailing. I thought about it. It's past my risk threshold. I'm out." And I just got so sick to my stomach. It was the first time, and I've experienced some extremely stressful things, but this was the first time where I felt like I was going to have a full-blown anxiety attack, And so I laid on the couch. My dog comes and lays on my chest, and I'm sitting there. And all that kept going through my mind was that book. And there was did you read the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So remember the part where he talks about there's always a move to make?
Yeah.
That's all I kept telling myself. There's always a move to make. There's always a move to make. There's got to be a move. And the only thing that hit me was one of our biggest investor at the time. He was in for like $500,000. And I even went to this guy. It was like a month and a half ago, and asking him, and he's like, no, I can't. I got too much stuff going on, but I appreciate it. Good luck, But he was the only one that I knew of that if there was a chance of saving this company at all, at least he would listen. And so the other challenge was that he was normally in San Diego that time of year, and if he wasn't in Phoenix, there was no way I was going to be able to pull at least $350,000 out of this guy, right? So I call him up. He's actually in Phoenix. I go over to his house, and that 15-minute drive it felt like 10 hours. And, I just didn't want, I loved the guy so much for just giving us $500,000. I became very close to him as a friend. Right. He was always there for me. And going over there, back to our early discussion about how badly do you really believe in what you're doing? Are you taking money from this? Are you trying to get money from this person because you truly think you have a shot here and that this is something that is going to one day be something? Or are you just delaying the inevitable?
Right.
It's not meant to be, right?
And half of you thought one, half of you thought the other.
That's exactly right. So the approach that I took was instead of, I honestly, as I pulled up to his house, I didn't really have an answer to that question. I definitely believed in it, but also when you're just getting beat down to the ground so badly, it's like, it's human nature. it's hard to believe in something, even if you believe in it, right? When you're getting beat that bad. So I decided just to be completely honest with him. Told him about we talked about the Chernobyl thing, and we talked about we definitely had some wins for sure. And
you're like, here's all the wins.
Yeah.
But here's like how fucked we are.
Exactly. Here's how fucked we are. And it's like this is that second line, and if I don't get at least $350,000 from you right now,
it's over.
I lose your $500,000.
Right.
And so 2 hours later, he just looks at me and he goes, "You know what, Brad? I never made this investment for your company because I've invested in shitty things that have succeeded, and I've invested in great things that have failed. There is necessarily no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
I invested into you. I don't care if you lose the money." He's like, "I got so much of it, it's ridiculous. So I'm going to write you a check, not for $350. I'm going to write you a check for $400,000. And I want you just to keep doing it. Keep your head down." Because
awesome.
He himself was a self-made success story. His story of struggle, actually the cancer that ultimately ended up taking his life, he blamed it on the stress that he put himself under during the early days of starting his company. And so that moment when he took out his checkbook and he was writing the check, I took a picture on my phone to remember that moment. And, to this day, I keep it on the wallpaper on my phone. And this is, so no matter how...
Say his name.
His name is Rick.
Okay.
Yeah. And, he passed away about 1.5 years ago, and I miss him to death. But it's that moment. And so when things get tough and things get challenging and stuff, it's so easy just to turn on my phone and look at Rick and be like, that's he believed in me and us, but he believed in me specifically enough to write that check when he totally didn't have to. He didn't care about losing the $500,000, right? So that's just always a reminder to keep up the fight.
Right.
No matter how crazy things get, no matter what happens right now, today, tomorrow, into the future, just keep up the fight and don't ever, ever forget where you come from. So even after Evercast and whatever happens here with Evercast, this will always be a reminder of where I came from, and to always just try to remain as humble as you possibly can. I mean,
that is an absolute phenomenal story, and like what a great reminder. And that happened, what, a year and a half ago, you said?
So that was 2000, I think it was like 18? September of 18. So, yeah.
2 years ago?
2 years ago, yep.
So, but like 2 years later, he's not even with us anymore.
Nope.
Which is also another reminder that life is so short.
Yeah, time.
And like it's it's about how you live it. It's not about becoming a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever.
Nope. It's the pursuit of happiness. If your pursuit of happiness is only money, that's where you see how many wealthy people are just, I mean, it's nice to have money, but they're just not happy people.
Right.
Right? Because what happens is, everyone, is that, and I've seen this, I've been very fortunate where, I mean, even though we're obviously experiencing success now, but I've been lucky, through people like my investors, like Rick. Rick had the sports cars, and he would let me drive them all the time and stuff, and, had a big house, and not just him, but many others. I've been very fortunate to experience those things. And I never forget, like, the moment that I was driving he had a Ferrari, brand new one. Like, it was the only one in Phoenix. It was the first one delivered to Phoenix. It was the 458 Spider convertible, right? And I'm sitting on Scottsdale Road by myself. He asked me to do an errand for him. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go take the car out, right? So I'm on Scottsdale Road, and I'm sitting there, and I've already driven it a bunch of times, right? And I had this weird moment where all of a sudden this $400,000 car that I'm driving just became a car. Like, literally, just a car.
Right.
And it was a weird moment for me, because now, all these things that I've experienced, all these things that you're taught that you have to achieve, and you got to get the car, the house, and all this type of stuff, those things eventually just become things, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like...
you're not taking them with you.
You're not taking them with you, and it's like everything has a honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
Relationships, houses, everything has a honeymoon phase, and eventually it just becomes part of your everyday life. And so the problem is that if you're basing your happiness around, those types of things, if you're fortunate enough to get to the point where you have enough money to experience or own all those things, they lose their thrill.
You run out of things to buy.
Exactly. And that's when ultimately money, the acquisition of money, becomes the pursuit itself, because you already had all the material things.
Right.
And I was told these things were supposed to make me happy, and all of a sudden, it's not that they'll make me sad, but they lose that thrill. That's the honeymoon phase, right? So that's why you have to find other things in your life that you're proud of, and that will make you happy. That
brings us full circle back to what we started the podcast with, which is what when you create something that other people love and they use and they embrace, and they're like giving positive feedback, that feeling is irreplaceable. Like, right? Like, you'd rather have that than the Ferrari any day, right?
What I would trade over anything that I will have in the future, anything that I have right now, what I would trade over anything is the fact that knowing that we saved thousands of jobs, that throughout especially during the core of the pandemic, so many people were not only able to keep working directly because of us, but thinking of all the hundreds of millions of people who watch Netflix, who watch Hulu, who watch all these movies and TV shows, right?
Right.
And that those shows were made possible because our software enabled that collaboration to happen and for creativity to continue, is the most rewarding thing of all. Hands down.
And you'll always have. No one can take that away from you.
That's...
Like, your money can, be gone or whatever, or it might hopefully 100-fold, but the reality is that is going to stay with you no matter what.
I can say now that in the pandemic, and it's something that we'll remember for the rest of our lives, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully there's not another one. Hopefully this is the one lifetime one, right? But that I'll look back on this and say, listen, regardless of what I have now, me and that team of people saved thousands of jobs and entertained unknown amounts of people during an extremely depressing and scary time for humankind.
Right.
Super proud of that. Super proud of it. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And, you know, and back to the whole struggle thing too, it's like, we were talking about we've lost people that we know because of the struggle, right? And it just ain't worth it. Like, if any of you out there are an entrepreneur and you're having if you're having troubles with it, and suicide shouldn't be an option, and you should, don't be afraid. Like, I think one of the things that also helps me is that I see a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Actually, a lot of people who are, you ask them how they're doing, and they go, especially an entrepreneur, I'm crushing it. Everything's fine, right? Even though deep down inside, things aren't fine. And actually, Ben talks about it in his book about how it's amazing how all the people who said their companies were crushing it, and why is it that fast forward 10 years later, and I'm the only one that actually survived, right?
Even Francine yesterday was talking about selling, or the day before, and on the podcast, she was talking about how, you tell everyone you're crushing it, but inside you don't know. You're always, as an entrepreneur, even if you're successful, you're like worried this thing can collapse at any time.
Always.
And you're trying to figure out, until the exit, you don't know if you've actually crushed it.
You don't know at all. And a lot of times you either are crushing it, but I saw this great little animation, and it showed what people think of entrepreneurs, and it shows this guy pulling a lion, like owning the lion, basically, right?
Okay.
How entrepreneurs really feel, and that the lion has the entrepreneur in its mouth, right? Like, that's one of my favorite. Yeah, no. So you're always you're always doubting, right?
Yeah.
But what I found to be easier is actually to be more honest with people. Where, especially like before the blow up, people would ask me how it's going, and I wouldn't tell them the whole truth necessarily, but I'd be like, we're not out of the woods yet. We still got some things we have to take care of, and blah, blah. Basically not putting this like false expectation on you. It's like, you almost put more pressure on you by faking it. By not being real with people and saying, actually things maybe aren't good. And by the way, being honest about that not only takes pressure off you, because then you're not creating false expectations with your friends and family when you're honest.
Yeah.
But also, you never know. You might have opened up to someone and say, things aren't good. And that person can be like, oh, my friend George or my friend Sarah, they can help you with that.
Right.
I can connect you. So I think, if you're don't be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
I lost a close friend to suicide directly because of entrepreneurship, and then a extremely close friend, a family member of mine, tried taking his life. He didn't succeed at it, but came very close, and that was such an eye opener. And this is someone who was a seasoned entrepreneur who owned a company for like 25 years. That even after all that time of owning a company and me looking up to this person as, man, this person is just so awesome, and I want to be like that person. And now seeing that person in such a vulnerable position, so much so that he was one of those people where nothing, like he could always do anything, right? And what happened is he built up this wall around him. So when things did get tough, he had like a perception about himself to maintain.
That he didn't want to break down those walls.
This is so and so, and I am the king of that, blah blah blah. Right. And so he was afraid to show vulnerability and reach out for help. And the irony of it is that that led to his attempted suicide, and that actually leads to the thing that I'm second most proud of. So what I just told you first about Evercast, but the second thing I'm most proud of is that this particular person, he tried doing it because his business was failing. But it actually wasn't failing. It was just, it needed a little bit of recalibration. But he just caught a bad moment, and he couldn't see the clearing through the trees, right?
Right.
And so ultimately, all the years that I've struggled and all the tools that I've had to put in place to help me struggle through, like creating these cash flow spreadsheets that I have, and ways to, when you're riding the line on cash flow and it's not like you have even $100 buffer. It's down to the $0 in cash flow. I was able to leverage all that experience that I had with all these years of struggling, and I was able to save his company, legitimately save his company. And after he recovered and went back to actually work, and he saw what I did, he ended up having like the best years of his company's career. I stepped in like while he was in the hospital and recovering. I got all the employees together, and luckily, I had Alex, and at the time, Blake was still really a big part of the company. So they said, "We'll take care of Evercast." I flew back, and for basically a month, I wrangled the troops and said, "Here's what we have to do. I've been through this. I know we can survive this. This is nothing compared to what I've had to deal with." Like that was the funny thing is like,
right.
oh my God, this is why he was upset.
Right,
oh man,
right.
I just got to make a few hard phone calls. That's about it. Piece of cake. And so I saved this company, and to this day, that is also one of the most important things in my life, because how special he was to me, how much I looked up to him throughout all my life, and honestly, the fact that it showed me that I did have what it took to be an entrepreneur. Because this is before Evercast blew up, right? It's like this was, I came off the failure of creative, struggling in the middle of Evercast, and going through that exercise made me realize I do know a thing or two about running a company. So that was a really rewarding moment in my life. And so back to, if you are struggling, if you are having problems, there's always a solution. Always a solution. As Ben said, there's always a move to make. And are you brave enough to make the move?
Right.
And if you're not brave enough to make the move, don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to open up, because you never know who could be your savior. Yeah. Don't try to hold a facade that's not real. So I'm super grateful. I'm so grateful for my experiences. I'm so grateful for the people in my life. And I wouldn't trade all that struggle and all those hard experiences. I wouldn't trade any of them for the world. Like I wouldn't. If people ask me,
awesome.
if you could go back to a certain age, where would you go? I would be right now.
Right now. This is the best.
This is the best moment of my life right now. I'm so thankful for all the bumps along the way.
Yeah.
And I would not go back. I just want to keep moving forward.
I couldn't agree more, by the way. I feel the same way, in that like this is the best moment of my life, and not that other moments haven't been also wonderful, but it's great. It's the journey. I've embraced that. Fortunately, I realized that early on, and have been embracing that, I think, throughout my life.
It's the opposite of, remember the movie Office Space?
Yeah.
Where he's sitting with the psychiatrist, and he's like, every day is the worst day of my life. And the guy's like, whoa, that's twisted. Is today the worst day of your life? Oh yeah. Oh wow. It's the opposite of that. Is that right now I'm just trying to take every day as looking at it as this is the best day of my life, because I am a little bit smarter than I was yesterday. I'm a little bit wiser. Yeah. And I wouldn't go back. I love it. Yeah, I cherish the struggle. I love it. I'm so thankful for it. I hated it at the time. And I'm still going through the struggle now. It's just a different type of struggle, but it's still there. And like, was it Francine you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like she said, I'm by under no means of the imagination. Like Evercast isn't a home run here. Like we still got work to do, and there's no guarantees for the future. But wouldn't take any of this back. I can appreciate the journey a little more. Yeah. And see. Connecting the dots, looking back, I can maybe connect a few of the dots.
The Steve Jobs
moving forward
quote. That's awesome. Yeah, we're connecting all the dots in this podcast.
That's right. That's right. That should be the title of the podcast. Connect the dots.
Oh, I like that. That's a great title. It could be a little tribute to, or like hidden tribute to Steve Jobs.
For sure, and he deserves it.
Yeah, and truly a hero. But before we start to wrap up, is there anything else you want to talk about, like that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, just give me like 60 seconds. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, we haven't really, I've been driving by Axosoft for, how long have you been in this building for, by the way?
2010
is
when we moved in here.
Yeah. So that's 2011 was when I started creative. So I drove by Axosoft. Had no idea what you guys did at the time, but like I remember always seeing Axosoft on the 101. What got you into it? Like why?
Entrepreneurship in general. Oh boy, that's going to be a long story.
But you can join my podcast. And we'll talk about that. That's fine. That's fine.
But no, I mean the 30-second version is that, like, growing up, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My parents were entrepreneurs. They had their own businesses, largely because they had to. They were in Iran, which is where they're from and where I was born. Like my mom was an entrepreneur because she had to, essentially, in order to like make things work. And Same with my dad. So they both worked together. When they came here, they couldn't get jobs necessarily. So they based. My dad was selling cars, and my mom was doing alterations.
Yeah, they were forced to roll up their sleeves and do something.
And eventually they got a gift shop in Old Town Scottsdale.
No way.
And my mom worked at that gift shop all the way till COVID, literally last year, which is like absolutely insane.
Where was it in Old Town?
In like Main Street.
Oh, yeah.
In Indian School.
Wow.
Or Main and Scottsdale Road. Just south of Indian
I'm
School.
sure I've been to it, especially when I was coming here as a younger kid.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So for, I don't know, since like 86, 87, they've had a gift shop over there. So,
amazing.
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, growing up, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and then like I fell in love with software early on. I was like maybe 12 years old when I fell in love with software, and then like I knew I was going to put the two together. And I kept trying.
Trying.
And eventually Axosoft was born. And
why Axosoft? I mean, why the...
So Axosoft was a developer tool for keeping track of like my own projects and teams. And, you know, it sort of spread from there. And I put it out on the internet for people to use freely, and they loved it. They gave feedback. And that satisfaction of like people using your thing was what drove me more than anything else. And it was free. But I knew like if I could get enough people to love it, because, you know, at the time, like shareware products had been successful in a similar sort of, freemium pattern of like start free. And then eventually if people love it, you can charge for it. That's what I did. And the rest is history.
So what year did you start it?
2002 is when I released the first version of the product. Yeah, I worked on it for like 6-7 months before I released the first version, and then 2003 was the first revenue, and 2004 is when I left my full-time job at Microsoft to work on Axosoft on a full-time basis, and revenues in 2004 were 300,000. So I grew like Axosoft organically and profitably from early on. And, yeah.
Well.
But that didn't prevent the struggles. There was times, like there was literally a day when 5 people, like almost the entire development team, and this happened much more recently, like 2015. The entire development, more than 2/3 of the development team, like literally walked out on one day. I mean, like I asked them to, but like I didn't ask the specific people. But we were like going through all kinds of struggles, which we'll leave for another podcast. But
quick note: if my development team's listening, I love you so much.
I love them too.
Love you guys.
But and I still love those guys. But the reality is that struggles happen, and it's just part of the whole journey. There was lots of crying and
I've lost. Actually, people know me as the crying Brad, because I still now I'm no longer. It's no longer crying of like tears of fear.
Yeah.
I oftentimes I get so emotional sometimes just because I'll something will happen, and then I'll reflect on, oh my God, you remember where we came from, and I'll just I'll lose it. And real quick, another great book if you haven't read, is by Scott Belski, who sold his company Behance, which was one of our competitors with Creative.
Okay, that's a local company, right?
No.
What am I thinking of? Okay, so keep going. What's the name of the book?
The Messy Middle.
Okay.
And it's about the same thing, as that every entrepreneurship is a little bit glorified.
Yeah.
But the middle is nasty, and it can be very nasty. It's the dev team walking out. It's the not getting the capital in. It's all those things. That's stuff that you don't hear about oftentimes, because you either don't hear about it because the people end up not making it, or it's they just, I don't think people talk about it enough, right? So that book, awesome book, talks about his experience starting Behance and the lessons that he learned along the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then one final book is a book called Lost and Founder.
Okay.
By the, I think his name's Rand Fishkin or something. He created Moz.
Yeah.
M-O-Z.
Oh, yeah. His story is super interesting.
Super interesting.
I know it sort of at a distance because of Moz and just like how successful that. And he had a blog where he was just blogging the entire journty of like them raising money, and then they raised money at like, I forget if it was $100 million valuation or if they raised $100 million at like $1 billion. But like shortly after that, shit hit the fan for them. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, it can go wrong at any time. Is what it comes down to.
For sure can. And Lost and Founder talks all about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Crazy.
Just embrace it. Don't give up, and don't be afraid to talk. And it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out either.
Well, I'm so glad you made the time to come out here and meet with me and share your story. Evercast looks like an amazing company. I'm going to be kicking myself for not having found you sooner.
Hey, it's not over yet. We'll see. Maybe we'll open up another round. Who knows? Or who knows what the future will bring.
Congratulations
Thank you, man.
On the forget about the financial success. Congratulations on the user success. On the fact that you created something amazing that people love, that use, as you said, that save jobs.
Yeah.
Super awesome.
Well, and congratulations to you for achieving what most entrepreneurs are in the pursuit of, is an actual exit. So that's super inspiring, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
Cool.
Well, we'll have to do this again soon then.
I'd be anytime.
All right.
We'll switch roles.
We'll have you interview me.
Perfect. Bring some Kleenex next time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Take care, man. Thank you.